Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the Push Podcast. My name's Jack Ferguson, an experienced brand strategist with a science background. In my career, I've worked across 25 industries and helped increase client and employer revenue by over $40 million. I will be your host. This season of the podcast is essential listening for marketers looking to better sell their strategies to stakeholders, get client buy-in, and keep internal teams engaged. Thanks for being here, and don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode 57, season 3. Thank you very much for tuning in with me today. Today, I'm going to be sharing some of my experiences with revenue growth and talking about what I believe to be causality behind a lot of the growth that I've seen over my career. I want to talk about how critical it is to work backwards from foundational truths when working out how to grow. This is my first principles of growth, if you will, or at least some of them. So today I'm going to share a story about a time back in my career. So this is quite a while ago now, but I was growing a Mexican restaurant chain. I was the head of marketing, and over the time I was with them, I launched 28 new locations for that brand. And I learned a lot during this time. Now, one of the reasons I chose this as a metaphor was that the promotional campaigns that accompanied the launches that I did means that it's easier to actually assess the effectiveness of promotion because it hasn't been around, like it might be a retail store that hasn't been around for 2 years, 4 years, and has built this equity and has word of mouth and has relationships with partners in the area that helps you grow. Like all that stuff hadn't happened yet. So you can really better isolate the impact of promotion itself. So the actual advertising of the launch and assess its effectiveness in a situation like this. I think it's a really clean example of seeing the impact that promotional tactics can have. And I think this is quite similar to launching a new product. So you can build hype for a product, but it hasn't been in the market for 3 or 4 years and got that traction where people are talking about it and they are continually referring it. You're not able to see someone else using it. It's not live yet. The only thing in that case you have to promote the product or get people knowing about it is advertising and communications. So you can think about, as I talk through this, that the launch of a product is another good metaphor for it. Some of the principles I want to outline in this episode. Now, this was a franchise that I was working for, so I had to allocate equal budget to each launch. So it wasn't a question of budget. And that's handy for the sake of comparison because it removes budget as a variable to compare in these instances. Now, all the launches that I did went either reasonably well or outstanding from a revenue perspective. Now, I'm not suggesting that's because I'm so amazing or because the promotions were so incredible. In fact, I'd argue that a lot of the promotion was quite mediocre. So why do I think those launches went so well? And what was the difference between them being good and great? And I'm going to answer the question simply by saying that the category was growing. So this was somewhat of a case of turn up, open your doors. Yes, let people know you're there, but it's an infinitely easier way to grow than trying to build a business in a declining category. More and more people in Australia were wanting this type of cuisine. Estimates are that the category grew about 4 to 6 times over the last 15 years. And we can see an example of how much it's grown from, say, Guzman and Gomez, who went from next to nothing pre-2010 to about $1 billion in sales about 15 to 20 years later. Now, I wasn't working for Guzman and Gomez, but that's a high-profile example that you may be able to relate to. So I think the category growth can be so intoxicating because you can grow revenue and lose market share in a growing category. So if your revenue goes up, but the category is growing so fast that competitors are taking revenue at a faster rate than you, you're ironically losing market share while your revenue is growing. And many, many small brands grow solely from category growth, not taking revenue share. I was talking to a business owner just the other day who told me that they hadn't had a single client, not one, leave a competitor to take up their service. And that was relevant for his first $2 million in ARR, so annual recurring revenue. He got his first $2 million in recurring revenue from category growth alone. He didn't steal a single client from a single competitor. So while he's happy he was ironically probably losing market share even though his business was growing. Does it matter? Not necessarily. But I think what else is important for us to note as marketers is that you can lose revenue and grow market share in a declining category as well. So if fewer buyers are buying in a category, but competitors are losing clients at a faster rate than you are, you're actually probably doing a really good job. And which is so interesting because you can do a mediocre job, grow revenue, and everyone be happy and smiling in a growing category. Or you could be doing an amazing job and the brand is losing revenue in a declining category. But if you weren't doing such a good job, you may be losing revenue much faster than what you are. So that's the power of category growth. And what does this all mean? So I'll shift my attention to the second question I asked at the start of the episode, which was, what's the difference between good and great when it came to these launches? So in the example of the Mexican chain restaurant, I shifted my efforts quite early on to working out what locations we should open in, not worrying about how to better launch locations. So I built an algorithm to test the demand for certain locations, and that was a key part of whether the brand decided to open in that location or not. So 95% of my effort over time went into working out where to open. 5% of my effort went into the launch itself. So it's a much better idea, in my opinion, to open where there's overflowing demand than trying to compensate for a lack of demand with advertising. So to give you an idea of numbers, I may have spent $300 to $400, and that's it on social media advertising leading up to a launch. It was hardly costly, but this would routinely get $40,000 to $60,000 of revenue in an opening week. And I actually remember in one location that the algorithm was telling me that this location is going to be wild. There's going to be so much demand here. And what ended up happening is that in their first week at that location, they had to shut the store because they couldn't handle the amount of traffic that was coming in. There was a massive lineup out the door, and the owner had to come out and say, look, sorry, you'll have to go home. We just can't deal with this many people. And in that launch, and I remember this distinctly, that I actually turned the advertising off because I could see that it was going to be such an enormous opening. I didn't need to promote it further. And if I had of, clearly, it would have been just a waste of additional money. Obviously, there wasn't much money going into it, so it wasn't going to be huge amounts of money that I saved, but I actually didn't want to overwhelm the store, which ironically did end up happening anyway. So we got what we asked for a bit there. We opened in a great spot and people flooded in. And we can use this metaphor for product creation as well. So most of the effort, I think, should go into working out whether a product should be created in the first place or not, as opposed to simply flogging it to death with advertising. We can think about this in terms of brand direction. Are our brands navigating to where there's a growing category or not? And this is where I'd love our marketing profession to get back to sooner rather than later. Market is the first 6 letters of the word after all. Marketing, in my opinion, should be mainly about the market. I think it's a shame we got the verb marketing as opposed to, say, finance, which may contribute to the expectation that we are doers rather than understanders per se. But there's been so many things across my career that I can point to that are like the restaurant launch example, where understanding the category, understanding the demand is infinitely more important than appealing to people within that market or category. So what can we do? So I think this episode is somewhat of a call to arms, I hope, to obsess about category growth. Look at where demand is increasing, as opposed to working out how we can more efficiently get our message out there, or more effectively get our message out there. Yes, that counts. It counts. But I think it's a long distance cousin and very much downstream from understanding demand and understanding the market first. Thanks for listening in today. I hope it gives you some good ideas. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating. I'll be back in your ears next week talking about how we speak to stakeholders and leadership about marketing tactics